right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All in Road Adventure podcast. And joining me today, I have Jason Nacey. Jason, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited about this. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I was initially planning on saving this for the Spartan Media Fest this year because you and I met there in Lake Tahoe last year around this the same time. But, you know, lo and behold, the world kind of changed up on us. So I don't think we're going to make that happen this year.
Yeah, which is kind of a bummer, man. I'm a little, you know, I got to say there's some cool things that have come out of this, out of the COVID situation. But then a lot of bummers as well, right? Like I feel really bad for all those seniors in high school who couldn't have the graduation. They missed their last, 2 or 3 months of school. Like that'd be kind of a bummer, right? I mean, obviously, like you and I have talked before, there's much worse things that could happen to a 19-year-old, right? But but the good things I think are interacting with people now over the internet, right? Or Zoom calls, Skype calls, whatever. It's pretty cool. I didn't do this as much as maybe I should have in the past. So it's really cool to because there's something about looking at somebody eye to eye, even if it is over video conference call or whatever. That connects you with people versus just a phone call. So.
Yeah. And there's definitely has been a moment where, a little bit of adaptability has had to come into play. And, I do agree with you to an extent. There are some, I don't know if hidden blessings, the right word, but I have kind of found like a little bit of a unique perspective. And it just kind of goes to show just how resilient we as people can be is that, we've always endured difficult moments in the past. I mean, long before you and I were even a part of this planet. So it just kind of serves as a good reminder, just what it is that we're capable of and that we can overcome insurmountable odds if we so choose.
For sure. And, I'm a huge believer in mental toughness, right? And like, just to give you an example, I live in Salt Lake City. And I live really close to the mountains. So fairly high elevation. We get a lot of snow in the winter. And I hated the snow, which is crazy because I've lived in Utah most of my life, right? And I didn't like the snow. And one day I thought, what can I do to change my perspective? So I thought, look, I'm like 5 minutes from the mouth of the canyon where there's like world-class skiing, right? So I thought, I'm going to get into skiing. Sure enough, now every time it snows, I'm like, yes. Like I just want it to keep dumping. And really the only thing that changed is finding something to change, my mentality of the situation. So I think that's the same thing with COVID. If we can find some cool things, we can complain about it. We can bitch and moan about it if we want, or we can look at things that maybe we wouldn't have had an opportunity to do before.
Right. And then of course, it's just adjusting accordingly. I mean, I was hoping we could have done this in person in Lake Tahoe this year, but we got to resort to the good old Zoom. And I was really interested in having you on here because when we talked in Squaw Valley before the Spartan World Championships, you kind of cued me in that, you've been around the world quite a bit and kind of in a similar capacity to how I have done in the past. I was a Peace Corps volunteer and I lived in West Africa for 2 years. And you were kind of telling me that you've been to multiple places around the world. You've been to Nepal. You also been to parts of Latin America to do service trips and helping others. So kind of talk to us a little bit about that and what actually kind of inspired you to go out and travel the world in this capacity.
So I wouldn't really say it's inspiration. I think the inspiration happened after. I'd be lying if I said I seek this out. So although we might have had similar situations, maybe you went into it a little different than I did. So I did video for a long time, and that's taken me all over the world. So for various companies I worked for, we would we would donate money to go build a school in Africa or something, or whatever the service project was, right? And a lot of times I would go out on these trips to film it, which was cool because I got to do two things. Like I flew out to do my job. So that was first and foremost, I went out to kind of document the situation, right? And the trip. But then I also got to meet cool people, and I got to help out with the service as well. So that's really how a lot of my trips started, was because of my film industry background. So
Gotcha. Okay. And so kind of dialing things in a little bit, we're getting kind of broad on the globe.
Yes.
I think Nepal was probably the most specific I got so far, but you also mentioned Africa, and I've also alluded to South America. So just exactly where have you been called to serve? And, how long are you usually there for whenever you go on one of these?
Yeah. So it varies. It's usually a week, 10 days, somewhere around there. And, the first trip I went to Ghana, right? And we went out because we built a school there, and I wasn't part of building the school, but the tribe, it was in the middle of nowhere. They wanted us to come back and obviously see the school, and they wanted to put on this big celebration and kind of honor the people that were a part of it, right? Like the founders of the company, right? So again, I went out to go document all this, and it was cool because I got to be a part of it. But it was wild, man. It's the first time and the only time I've been to Africa, actually, and it was mind blowing. Flying into Ghana, and we were in the main city there for a couple of days, and then we flew out closer to the coast to go do some stuff. And just looking at the landscape from an airplane is just, it's way different than the States, right? Completely different. But when I went out there, it was crazy because it changes your perspective when you see the different lifestyles, right? So they put on this big soccer tournament because the company I worked for was the front jersey sponsor of a soccer team, right?
Okay.
They go out there, and the winner of this tournament, we took a bunch of jerseys for the two teams that were in the finals, and then some other goodies for the other kids. But they had tribes from all around the area that put together teams, like tribe teams of kids, and they played this whole tournament before we got there. And then the final game was supposed to be there. We were the guest of honors to watch it, and I got to tell you, it kind of blew me away, the mentality, like walking into this village with no running water, no power. The school that was built was the nicest structure there, but still very like water, right? Like nothing, there was nothing flashy about it. And so I'm watching this tournament or this match, right? Most of the kids don't even have shoes, and the goalie, and it's dirt. So they just cleared this field of dirt for the soccer match. And then there were some metal posts, right? Like there was no net or anything. And I remember watching this kid have this awesome break down the sideline towards the goalie, nobody in front of him. And I was like, dude, this kid's going to score. And then the ball hits a big rock and goes out of bounds. And I was like, oh man. And dude, we've seen professionals who like roll around the ground for 5 minutes because somebody tapped them on the shoulder, right? Like it's kind of gotten a little bit out of control, right? But regardless of any of that, like I would have been upset if I was that player and going down, had a great opportunity, a great look at goal, and then to lose the ball from a rock that was just in the field. And dude, this kid just kind of looked at it and shrugged his shoulders like, well, that's a bummer. And the other team got it. And I was like, holy cow, man, like it was really cool to see that. And the other thing that blew my mind was how happy all these kids were. They had nothing. And I was like, dude, these kids are happier than most American kids that have everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really good, I don't want to say reminder, because I had never seen anything like this before, right? It was eye-opening to see how happy kids were without anything versus kids who have everything and they just still want more. So it was, you know, and it really changes your perspective on your own life. I got another story like not too long ago. So I work for a company called USANA. That's a nutrition company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And USANA has a foundation, and their main goal is going out and feeding malnutrition kids, right? And even here in Utah, they've got a program where they go and to schools, and they make lunches, or I shouldn't say lunches. They pack meals and they take them to the school for the kids who go home and don't get dinner, right? So we make these for the weekends, right? Which was another crazy thing with COVID, because a crazy stat that I didn't know, but my really good buddy Brian, who is the president of the foundation, he told me I think it's 1 in 4 kids in Utah go home hungry and don't have enough to eat, which blows my mind, right? Because you don't think that happens in the States. And so anyways, as part of this foundation, I was in Haiti, and I was actually in Haiti with my buddy who's the president of the foundation. And it was right after the hurricane, probably like a month after the hurricane. And just being there and helping the people and seeing all this craziness going on, you know, I gotta say, and this might be controversial, but I really feel like homeless people in the States have it better than most people in Haiti, like from what I could see. They were taken care of more, right? Like, I mean, these people didn't know. I mean, they hadn't eaten for days, right? And they don't know where their next meal is going to come. You know, talk about desperation. Like, you have no idea where or when your next meal is going to be, how you're going to get it. Like, just, I don't think people have really like pondered that much, you know, and thought about that. Like, cause for us here, we don't have to worry about that. So we can worry about, oh, how am I going to make money? Or how am I going to do this? Or how, you know, like all the good stuff. If your main worry is about your next meal, like that's all you think about. You know, what am I going to do? How am I going to get my next meal? How am I going to, it'd be a crazy burden, you know, if that literally was all like that took up the 90% of your mental space.
Right. Yeah. Because I've experienced something like that when I was living in West Africa. I mean, well, we certainly have a lot to unpack there with what you just mentioned, but I'll kind of just carry on with your last point there, is that, you know, I found myself getting frustrated with many things in my life, and looking back on them in hindsight, I'm just thinking to myself, you know, those were just really trivial things. They really should not have taken up as much space in my head as I let them. But I remember there was one time in the Gambia in my village, the water taps, I should say, throughout my village, they're run by solar panels, and something went haywire with them and the pump stopped working. And they weren't able to get it fixed for 3 whole days. So for meaning 3 whole days, I literally had whatever I was able to collect before then remaining as far as water. And so I had to basically take every single all the water I had and use it just for drinking. And so no bathing, no washing clothes, no washing dishes. I didn't want to exercise because I didn't want to sweat out precious fluids. And I tell you, man, very few things messed with my head more than the thought of possibly not being able to fill this basic need of drinking water, because you're absolutely right. Here stateside, you just turn on the faucet like first thing in the morning, have endless amounts of drinking water, and you don't think twice about it. But out there is just, I have never been so frustrated in my life about thinking about the fact of that I can't get water right now, and this is all I have. But I think what kind of kept me in check, and this was also very humbling, was that if I can't get water right now, my host family and the other villagers can't get it either. And most of the family members of my host family were young children. And so I'm thinking, and then yet they're still smiling and laughing, like kind of how you talked about earlier. I'm like, how? It's unbelievable. But clearly they've come to just, hardship and just taking those extra steps just to fulfill their basic needs. That's just commonplace. It's just like, I'm sure something like that was pretty easy for them to get over. I'm imagining that's probably not the first time that's even happened to them.
Yeah.
And but again, it just kind of just goes to show that perspective, like you talked about, that we have it pretty good here. And so maybe we shouldn't really dwell too much on, I don't know, the barista getting your order at Starbucks wrong or something like that, or the line at the grocery store, being longer than what you would like it to be. So there's a lot of things to gain from, those experiences.
Well, and just going back to what you said, like we both have seen several villages out in the middle of nowhere. They don't wait in a line at a grocery store. They don't turn on a faucet. Sometimes they're walking miles to just get water, and then miles back. We don't understand how good it is. And that's why I gotta say, if people have a chance to go to a service trip and go and experience that, it really changes your perspective. But I'm not gonna lie, it's easy to I go on these maybe, average about once every couple years. Mm-hmm. And it's easy after a year or two to kind of slip back in and to think, oh, I need this, I need that. And we start turning wants into needs, and we all do it. Like it, so I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's great to go and see how most of the other world lives, to understand how good we got it. Because I got to say, you brought up Nepal. When I was in Nepal after the earthquake, we were giving families food, like a lot of these food packs, right? Because they didn't have anywhere to get food. And that earthquake was devastating. And it was crazy going there and seeing like all the destruction. And I ended up going to this village. Okay, this was probably a month after I did a full Ironman, right? I'm in the best shape of my life at this point. And we get to this town and they tell me, okay, we're hiking into this village. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm fit, right? I'm just like,
yeah, you're Ironman, man.
Yeah, I'm just like, dude, I just did an Ironman, no big deal. I got a 50-pound pack because I had a drone on it, and this was like 6 years ago, so this was before the small drones.
Yeah, the little mini ones. Yeah,
yeah, like this was the big DJI one, the Inspire, that was one of the first drones that was really accessible, right? So I got this drone, camera, batteries, and I'm thinking, yeah, dude, this is no big deal. Let's go. We had to hike through a river that was up to our waist. And I'm just, the whole time I'm thinking, yeah, this is cool. I'm liking this. It's an adventure, right? I pull out I was with some other Americans that weren't in as good of shape. We'll just leave it at that, right? So we ended up taking a break, kind of by this dried up riverbed. So it was kind of a flat area. And so I thought, okay, we're going to sit here for a while. I'm going to pull out the drone and like get some of the cool scenery and then fly up to the village and kind of do like a cool shot of the village. So I'm talking to our guide. I got the drone up and I'm like, okay, where's the village? Is it right up there on that ridge? And he's like, no, higher. And I'm like, how do you get higher? And he kept saying, no, higher. My drone wouldn't go any higher. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there thinking, this guy just doesn't understand what I'm asking, whatever. So I got some other shots, landed the drone. We packed up, started walking. So we get to the base of the mountain to go up to this remote village, right? And I had my Garmin on the time. So I took a picture of where we were at the elevation that we were at. And when I got to the top, it was 0.6 miles. So just over half a mile. I want to say it was like 3,000 feet, something ridiculous. It was insane. Like literally there was times where I was like, dude, there's no way that this would be legal in the States. Like there's no way that this would be a trail that would lead to somewhere, because it was just straight up. Like, so here I'm the healthiest I've ever been, fit as a fiddle, and I could barely make it up there with a 50-pound pack. And I'd finally get up to the village. Nobody else made it like any of the other Americans. One finally did. Like 2 hours later, when I was heading back down after I got all the filming and everything done that I needed. Dude, it was like they had houses up there. Well, I mean, not what we would call houses, right? But for them, like
for dwellings, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cinder block, tin roofs, and I'm thinking, how the hell did they get all this stuff up here? How did they get it up here? Like it's crazy. So, but one thing that was interesting, and I don't know if you've run into this before, but I like to share this as much as I can, because I didn't know this beforehand, and I was a little prideful, right? Like people were like, oh, a lot of the locals were like, let me carry your bag. And I'm thinking, dude, like this is my bag. Not that I was worried about it, but I'm just like, this is my bag. I should have to take it up. Like I should have to suffer to get it up there. I don't want somebody else suffering, right? And it wasn't until later on in life, when I was telling that story, that somebody was like, no, they want to carry your bag because that's how you can pay them. Like they want to work. And like, it didn't even dawn on me. It was like, these guys wanted to help because they didn't want a free handout, but they don't have work. Like there's not a lot of work up there. So it's an opportunity for them to make money. And dude, even if I would have given them $5 American, or what was equivalent to $5 American, it would have been awesome for me, and it would have been awesome for them. And it was a win-win. Instead, I suffered through it with this 50-pound pack, right? And it was hell trying to get it up there. So if anybody runs into that same type of situation, just understand when people ask to do stuff like that, they're most of the time they're wanting to help, because then they're hoping that you tip them.
Right. Yeah, that actually has happened to me before in the Gambia. Now, for a long time, we had what we call geli-gelis in the Gambia, basically just modified vans that would take people to and fro. And eventually they got like a bus system and everything like that though too. But for the buses, it was usually just the driver, and there would normally just be other Gambians that would show up who would like load people's luggage on top of the bus and strap things down. And, they usually would just ask for, like you said, a tip of some kind. And that's what I had to do with my bicycle. I asked this man if he could, strap my bicycle to the top, and I just tipped him a little bit. And, that's how a lot of them find other means to make money. Now, what I'm kind of, interested, a thought that just kind of came to mind is that you're on this village or you're on this mountain with this village on it way, 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 way up there that's just been impacted by this earthquake. And I think just kind of going back to our previous discussion about perspective is that, what happens if something goes wrong, like in your community, like God forbid a fire breaks out, or if we do have an earthquake, you just pull out your phone, you dial 911, and here comes the fire engines just screaming over the next hill, right? But how is emergency aid supposed to get up there to help these people, like in an emergency?
Yeah, it doesn't. And to that point, like, so what was interesting about going to that village is that we had, like, I don't know if people understand the earthquake happened in the middle of the day, right? Mm-hmm. Luckily, because people were outside, they were working. That's why the death toll was significantly lower than it could have been. Right. So when I was up in this village, like, there was these huts that were made out of stone and whatever, right? That were constructed that were just collapsed. And I went to some villages where they lost their livestock, which was their livelihood, because they had maybe a goat and a cow that was in a building trying to stay in the shade or whatever, and it got crushed by the building, right? So, like, here we have earthquake codes, all sorts of stuff, right? Like building codes, so that if we have a disaster, it's kind of minimal, right? Where they don't have any kind of building codes or anything. And man, like, some of these villages out in the middle of nowhere, like, the whole village was destroyed, like, gone. Imagine that. Like, you say, we call 911, right? Imagine if all your neighbors, like, you're out working in the field doing whatever, and you come back and your village is gone. And they probably knew their village was going to be gone, right? Because they felt the earthquake, so it wasn't a shock to them. But they probably rushed back thinking, oh man, like, what do we have left? And some of them lost everything, you know, and they've worked a whole life for, which to us could have only been like a couple $1,000s, but to them was something that took their whole lives to get, and they lost it in an instant.
Right. And it's a bit of a harrowing feeling, just kind of, I imagine, especially for them at first following the earthquake, thinking to themselves, maybe help will come, but right now we are entirely on our own. Another similar experience that I had in the Gambia was one night there was a fire in my village. And at first I just kind of wrote it off as just, it was a bonfire, because, you know, a lot of the villagers, they'd have bonfires in their compound, there'd be singing and dancing. So at first I didn't really think much of it. But then I come to realize that this one was a lot brighter than the other ones I've seen in other nights. And people weren't singing and dancing, they were screaming and they were hollering. So I knew something was wrong. And I rushed over there. I put on my shoes, and it was in the middle of the night. I had just finished showering and I was getting ready to wind down for bed. But then I, had to get dressed up, and I run over there, and one of the buildings in the village was on fire. And this was a pretty tight-knit village, not just within the community, but like a lot of the homes and buildings were just kind of built together as well. So if we let this fire get out of control, it could take other buildings along with it. So, and that was the harrowing reminder when I just saw these villagers running back and forth, carrying bowls of sand and water and things like that. I'm like, no one's coming to save us for this. It's like, we're on our own here. So, and I just remembered I'm joining in on the fight. I'm grabbing empty bowls because they had people on the roofs of nearby buildings who were trying to dump in the sand and the water that was brought up and passed up to them. I'm grabbing empty bowls. I'm trying to hand them to people. And I just remembered I got really frustrated because it's strange how this is similar across different cultures. Where here in the States, and I'm not sure how we got to this point, where if someone sees a disaster or something going wrong, their instincts are just to pull out their phones and start recording or just stand back and watch, right? And I noticed that there was some of the villagers were doing that too. Some of them looked like they were able-bodied men that could have lended a hand. And I just got really frustrated. And I go up to this one guy and I shove the bowl in his chest, and I'm like, "Dore sasa," which means sand now. And so then he's like, and I'm like, "Sasa." And then he goes and he starts collecting more sand. But again, it was just that harrowing reminder, and just that yeah, no one's coming over that hill to save us. There's no fire engine, there's no fire hydrants here that we can use. It's like, we got to stop this fire or it can take the village. And so we did get it put out, of course, but yeah. And needless to say, I had a hard time sleeping after that, just because I had my adrenaline was spiked so high, and I was worried if people were hurt or something. So it was crazy.
Oh yeah. And again, like we were talking earlier, like that, people probably lost things that they worked their whole lives for, things that were passed down, maybe a house or whatever that was passed down to them. Right. I mean, they don't have banks like we do in structure where they can go get a loan. That was the other thing that I really noticed in Africa when I was over there in Ghana, was a lot of half-built houses. And there were so many of them. I asked our guide, I was like, why are there so many and no construction being done, right? Just like what looked like abandoned houses. And the guy was like, oh no, that like one of the houses, he's like, that rich people own that. It was like a doctor, like the husband and wife were doctors, and they were building it, but they have to build it over time. They've got to build it when they can pay for each brick. It's not like they go get a loan and they've got a house and then they pay it off. Like, no, they've either got to build it themselves or and pay for the materials as they go. So,
oh, man. Yeah, I've seen houses like that, and I've always wondered why they look that way. I just figured that they were construction projects where they underestimated the budget and the budget ran out, so they just left it or whatever. But yeah. I guess it very well just may have been like you just suggested, that, yeah, it's just this is going to take a little bit of time. So really interesting. So kind of just like interacting with the people, how you are, what were kind of some of like the other like impressions or perspectives that you kind of gained from the people, especially like, you're working pretty closely to them. They see you all sort of every day. And just, I guess, kind of how did they take to you all just kind of being there? Because I imagine, especially with this village in Nepal being so high up there, I doubt that there's very other Westerners that are going to be willing to make that hike. So I guess, what was that like?
No, so it was really cool. It was really cool. The villagers were all super welcoming. And at the time, it's going to sound funny, but at the time I was vegan, right? And one of the villagers invited me over to eat with him, and everything's chicken there, right? And chicken and rice. So I remember thinking, oh man, I hadn't eaten meat in a while, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to be rude, but I don't want to break this like streak that I've been on, and I was feeling good not eating meat and all this stuff. But I ended up eating anyways, and it's amazing. It was amazing food, but it was interesting because it was all cooked outside, right? Like, sure, nothing was washed. And I'm not like a germaphobe, but that kind of stuff runs through my mind a little bit when I'm eating, because I'm sure like when you're traveling a ton, you don't want to get sick. You don't want at all. You don't want an upset stomach, right? And especially when you're in an unfamiliar environment. I mean, when I was in Ghana, I had bottled water, and I also poured it in a filter. Like, and I brushed my teeth with that water. Like, I was really strict because, dude, I don't want to be in a van driving 3 hours to a village and all of a sudden get an upset stomach.
Right.
Like that's like my biggest fear, right? So I'm really careful about that kind of stuff when I'm traveling. You can be adventurous if you're like in London, right? Because you've got a hotel and there's places around, right? But when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you're not used to the bathroom facilities, when it's just a hole in the ground and you got to kind of just squat, right? And they got a little bucket there where it's like, yeah. Those are totally different experiences, right? But so I remember eating this chicken and just thinking, oh man, like what was the process of making this? And then I'm eating with the villagers, and the villagers, again, super, super nice, but they're like eating with their hands. And it was actually amazing to watch them eat. And that's when it just kind of dawns on you, right? Like when you actually mingle with the locals, you eat with the locals, all of a sudden you're getting this local experience that most people don't. Like there's been millions of people that have gone to Nepal, right? But have they actually experienced culturally what it's really like? Like, dude, just watching these guys eat with their hands and how they scooped up this rice and this plate and all this. And I was just like, wow, that's really efficient. And they were really good at it. So, but another story. So when I was up in this village and I had the drone, I took it out because I wanted to get shots of, the broken buildings and stuff and kind of the landscape and how high we were, just so when I put a video together, there was the perspective. Right? Dude, it was so hard to fly my drone around because these kids kept grabbing my arm because they wanted to see the picture. They were just fascinated, so it was kind of cool to like bring this technology to them. And anytime I go to any of these places and I have my camera and I'm taking pictures and you show the little kids, they're just like blown away. And again, you don't think about it, like we are inundated with pictures everywhere, right? You got Instagram, Facebook. There's just, so we're used to seeing pictures of ourselves and everybody else, like it's no big deal. But these little kids in these villages, some of them have never even seen themselves.
Right.
Like, and it trips them out to see a picture. It like blows their mind. They're like, wait a second, this is crazy. So, but yeah, it was pretty cool filming all that stuff with the drone and just watching their minds like melt because and finally I had to land the drone because I was like, literally kids were grabbing my arm and hanging on me trying to see, and I'm trying to fly it as well, but I can't because there's like 100 kids trying to look at the monitor. It was super fun.
Yeah. Going back to what you were sort of talking about food just now, and I have certainly come to notice that as I've made my way around the world is that, it's kind of tough if you have, dietary restrictions, so to speak. And it was certainly the case when I was, traveling throughout West Africa is that you kind of need to lower your standards just a little bit, not with just like the food choices, but also like the cleanliness. I mean, I know that a lot of like the people I would order food from, which usually would be like, people just having like roadside stands where they would just like cook right there. And, if you ask for like a sandwich and they drop, your bread on the ground, they're just going to pick it off and just brush it off really quick and still use it. So, I mean, I don't think our health departments here stateside would be too thrilled about, some people's operations out there, but I'm just like, it's kind of just keeps an open mind a little bit. It's like, all right, just go ahead and finish the sandwich. It's fine. I don't care if it just dropped down. I mean, but of course, then again, sometimes you're just so hungry anyway. And I always say that hunger's the best spice. So, I mean, I don't care if it's dirty and it's tainted now. I still want it. I'm starving here.
Dude, speaking of food, I was the first time I ever went to Asia, I went to Taiwan, right? Not what I was expecting. And we landed a little bit later. The time differences, I'm not tired. So I want to go down to this night market and I want to get some Asian food, right? And I'm thinking Panda Express, I want some orange chicken or whatever, right? Which is another huge shock, but it's like I go to this night village and we're looking at the menu in this nice looking place. And this guy comes up to us and he's like, yeah, do you want to order? And we're like, yeah, sure. This is what I want. Cause communication. So there wasn't even that kind of communication. That's just me kind of I guess, explaining the body language that was going on between.
Yeah, just point to something and just go with whatever it is.
Yeah. So kind of point to something, and he gives the motion like, hey, follow me. So we thought he was going to set us down at the table, and he takes us like a block away down this alley into this really shady place. And I'm like, and at that time I wasn't really an experienced traveler, and I'm just like, I guess we eat here, right? And it was a real bizarre experience, the whole thing. And then this truck pulls up with a bunch of dead pigs that are just cut in half, right?
Oh,
They're
wow.
just cut right down the middle, so you can, you can see everything. And he gets out of his truck, and he's like super dirty, and they're hanging from like hooks in the back of this truck, and hops out right in front of where we're eating. And again, like a shirt that was white, but at this point it was black. I mean, you could see white, but you could just tell it was like filthy. So he hops in the back of this truck, throws a half dead pig over his shoulder, the one that's black. And now I know why it's black, right? And walks back to what I'm assuming is the kitchen of where we were eating. And I was just thinking, oh my dude, this is insane. All those like thoughts of, I'm going to catch something. I mean, cause it's hot and humid there, and who knows how long the pigs have been dead and cut in half. So like they're totally exposed. And oh man, I was just like, this is not what I was expecting.
Right. And you don't even know entirely what you just picked off that menu either. It could have been one of the pigs.
Oh, for sure. And when we got what we ordered, it was like this soup, and it was literally boiling, which was a good thing because, it kills everything, right? In theory.
Mm-hmm.
But
in theory, yeah.
Yeah, I had to sit there for like 20 minutes before I could even have any. But that's how they eat their food over there. Like their soups are ridiculously hot, but they've gotten used to it, right?
Right.
It's just like in South America and the spices and stuff. If you're not used to those spices, they can really mess with you. But if you grow up on them, you grow up in that culture. It's just the way it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So overall, now that we're kind of talking about food and diets, you mentioned that, like, especially when you had went to Nepal, you were a vegan at the time, which, by the way, are you still kind of sticking to more of a plant-based diet now? Or are you kind of just changing things up, or?
Yeah, I changed things up. I'm a tinkerer when it comes to stuff like that. So I was a vegan for 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then my body was kind of craving stuff. And I've got the mentality, if my body's craving something, and it wasn't me craving, like there's a difference between, like, I would cook bacon and it would smell good, but I was fine not eating it. And then one day my body was just kind of craving meat. And, some people listening might be like, well, that doesn't mean you have to eat it or whatever. Right. But like for me, I felt like maybe my body needed it. And I remember the first day I went to a really good hamburger place and had a hamburger, and it tasted like cardboard to me. I was just like, I'm not really missing anything. So, but a lot's changed over the last 6 years, right? So I'm not vegan, but I do intermittent fasting, and sometimes I'll go without meat for, like, just a couple of weeks ago, I went 10 days without eating meat.
Gotcha.
So I just mix it up.
Sure. Yeah. So what I was initially asking is that, going to these very, very remote places, and also, as you've mentioned, you've been an athlete for a long time. You've done Ironman, and I know you've also done some obstacle course racing as well. So how did you find that you were able to manage and kind of maintain your health and wellness kind of in these environments? Because I think here stateside, when we're kind of stationary for a while, we get into good routines. We have our, grocery stores that we go to, or we have butchers that we work with, and, we can get everything that we want to optimize our health, and we got our gyms and, you know, whatever the case may be. But when we're traveling and our routine is broken, pretty much shattered, actually, what were you able to find ways to kind of sort of maintain your health and wellness? Were you able to like train when you're up on like the mountains or in Ghana? You know, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I didn't really, when I'm out doing this kind of stuff, I'm on my feet all day, lugging around gear, helping, you know, unload trucks with these boxes of meals and stuff like that. And you're in the humidity, sweating. So I'm never worried about getting cardio in and exercising. But I do have a routine where I don't eat food on an airplane. I'll usually fast, even if it's a 14-hour flight, and I'll pack some stuff with me just in case, like the packets of peanut butter or whatever, things like that. So if I feel like I need it, you know, I have it. But about a year ago, I decided to fast for 96 hours just to see if I could do it. So that really changed my perspective on a lot of things, where like, even when I'm hungry, I know I'm not hungry. And so usually I just kind of wing it and just, you know, you get what you get there. Sometimes it's remote places and you just kind of eat what the locals eat. I got another funny story about that in Ghana. We're eating, oh my gosh, I can't even remember what they called it now, but it was just kind of mashed up plantains, which are small, like little bananas.
Right.
And it was just this, so this local is telling me how to eat it. And he's like, you grab it. It's like a big kind of dough ball, really weird. He's like, you grab it and you dip it in sauce and you swallow it. And I was like, you just swallow it? And he's like, yeah. It's like, why don't you bite on it? And he's like, don't bite it because it doesn't taste good. And I'm like, then why do you eat it? Like, what's the point of it? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders, and then it dawned on me, like, it's just a filler. Like sometimes that's all they have. So it doesn't taste good. They swallow it just so they don't feel hungry anymore. And so they get some kind of calories and so, you know, for energy. And that was another time where I was just like, oh my God, like this is insane. Like this is so different to the lifestyle I live in the States. And again, it's a great reminder of how good you have it, you know?
Yeah.
I remember coming home off one of those trips, and almost every trip I go on, I come home and I kind of feel like an asshole, right? Like I don't live in an extravagant house, but it's, you know, a 2-car garage is twice the size of most of these houses in these villages, right? Whether it's Haiti, Ghana, Nepal, like, you know, so when I come home from the airport and open my garage to park a car in it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, dude, like, you know I don't need this stuff, but at the same time, it's just like, you know, it's nice to have. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have it, but it's always a reminder. And whenever I get home, I always feel like that. I always feel like, dude, I got too much stuff. I've got 4 kids. So I'm always like, I want to take them on one of these trips so they understand how good they have it.
Right.
But also, like, I make sure to take videos and pictures. And I always kind of try to do a slideshow when I get home for my kids. Like I'll just I'll connect my phone to the TV and just show them all the pictures. But the problem is, you know, we all know the commercials of the kids, you know, from Africa that are bloated and flies are landing on them, you know, and they're asking for donations, right? And that's horrible. But seeing that in a commercial in the comfort of your own house is completely different than seeing it in person, the smells and everything else, right? Like it's more real. So that's why I want to take my kids on a trip. So they understand too, like, yeah, some of these kids have to walk 2 miles, 3 miles to school, and they're just super stoked to go to school, and it's a kids from several different villages that congregate into this one building. And there's one teacher teaching, what we would call a fifth grader and a third grader or whatever. Like there's, some of them don't have much separation because you've got one person who can teach them, or maybe two people.
Right. Yeah. It was a bit of an eye opener for me as well, because here in the US, especially, a lot of people may be upset about things within the US. We know there's a lot of political tension right now. We don't have to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but we are very much a land of abundance. We have an abundance of calories. We have an abundance of, fun activities and things to do. We have an abundance of, water and basic necessities and electricity and electronics and material possessions up the wazoo. But going to West Africa, and of course you just alluded to this as well, is that you're grateful for every little thing that you get, and you don't eat for taste and just like the sensational satisfaction of eating the food. You eat it because you need that to actually live. You need those calories to move into function and just to, go about your life. And I remember one of my host families, I had two host families. I had a host family for my first 3 months of training, and then I had my host family for the remainder of my time. But my first host family, I just remembered how grateful I was, where like I was just so hungry in the morning, and they just brought me like a loaf of bread with some butter on it. Like that was it. Nothing else. Normally I would say, well, okay, you gave me the bread and the butter, but where's my eggs? Where's my bacon? Where's my, this and that? But of course I knew it wasn't coming. And of course I didn't complain. I didn't whine, because to them, I knew that they probably might even had to go through a little bit just to bring me that alone. It's not like, again, they can just run to McDonald's and bring me back an Egg McMuffin with hash browns and all this other stuff, whereas us, if we wanted to, we can order that stuff from our phones and someone brings it to our door. But yeah, it just kind of just goes to show that, we live in a land of abundance and we have a lot to be grateful for, but it seems like sometimes we have a tendency to look towards things that bother us more than, things that we should be grateful for, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. And, some of this political stuff that's going on right now is really upsetting to me. And again, we don't need to go too much into it, but the last trip I went on was Thailand. And we went and helped out at a compound for kids who were snatched out of human trafficking situations.
Oh, right? Wow.
So either they were stuck in these situations and rescued, or people knew that they were about to get taken. So these guys would go in and this was like, they were very secretive. There was people with automatic weapons walking the perimeter. Like they didn't want anybody to know where this was at, because, for fear that these predators would come back, and they try to get them back. Right. And, it makes me think about, some of the feelings of oppression that's going on here. And I'm not saying that it's not, or that it is, whatever. Right. Like I want to stay out of that political realm, but I don't think people understand that slavery is more prevalent nowadays than it's ever been. But we don't see it, and we don't talk about it, and the media doesn't talk about it. And going over to Thailand and learning about this stuff, it was eye-opening to me, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And when I said that sometimes if they know that somebody's going to get taken into a human trafficking situation, they'll come in and scoop them up. So what happens, because I asked them, I was like, well, how does that happen? Like, how do you guys know that that's about to happen or whatever? And how do you save people from that? So if a kid or kids' parents die somehow, relatives will take their kids and, hopefully raise them and take care of them. Right. But most of them can't. So it's not even this place where these families are evil, right? They can't even feed their own kids. And then they just get 3 more kids because maybe this guy's brother died. Right. So they sell them off. And it's a horrible thing, and for us, we think, how could anybody do that? But if you look from the other perspective, again, not saying it's right because it is awful, but if you can't even take care of your own family and you get 3 other kids that you have to take care of, all of a sudden here's an opportunity now to make a little bit of money, so they'll hear about situations like that and then they'll go scoop the kids up before they end up in predators' hands. But another thing that I didn't realize, and this is going to sound horrible, right? But because I'm not saying I'm for this, right? But like prostitution, I'm pretty liberal in a lot of aspects, right? If people are gay, whatever. If people want to sell their bodies, whatever. Like if they're 2 consenting adults, it's like, yeah, what's the big deal, right?
Yeah, that doesn't really come back on you very much. So it's kind of like it's out of your hands, basically. So
yeah. So it's like, so I kind of had this mentality before, and then when I went to this compound where they talked about human trafficking, sex trafficking, all that, like it dawned on me, most women who are probably in that realm are not there by choice.
Right.
And when you look at it from that perspective, then it's like, yeah. So I understand why it's illegal. Not that I thought that it was a good thing, right? It was just kind of one of those things. It's just like, it's almost like drugs in a sense. If somebody wants to smoke weed, like it's not hurting me. And like, what's the big deal, right? So, but sometimes you learn backstories that help you understand situations. And what they told me that the biggest event is the Super Bowl every year. Like these predators, these traffickers will bring in people, kids, women, whatever it is, to whatever cities that's hosting the Super Bowl. And it's not just the Super Bowl, it's big events, right? Mm-hmm. Where they bring them in, and it's crazy. Like I never even thought about that. Like I didn't even know that happened. And it was mind blowing to me to learn all of this stuff. So, sometimes when I hear all the crap that's going on, not the crap, when I hear about stuff that's going on now, it's just like, dude, it's still happening. This isn't stuff that just happened 200 years ago. Right. Or even the oppression now that happens. And I believe it happens. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, mm-hmm. but it's like, you look at the bigger picture too. I mean, there's kids that are being snatched, kidnapped, stolen, whatever, sold into this horrible lifestyle, into this horrible, sex slavery. It's mind blowing. So I got to say that was one of probably the most eye-opening trips that I went on, where I didn't know as much as I thought I knew.
Right.
And it freaked me out.
Right. And yeah, because, going along with that industry and, it's something I've been kind of becoming more and more aware of myself. And, and I'll see things on social media about like all those kids that were just rescued in Georgia. And I'm thinking to myself, that's really awesome. Why is that not, being brought forth in mainstream media? Because with everything that's going on, there's a lot of, again, with the tension that we've been talking about, that's something that anyone, anywhere, regardless of their political affiliation or whatever else, they can get behind fighting that, mm-hmm. And I think maybe that's kind of, these traffickers, I'm sure that's probably their strategy, is that while we're all distracted, they're lurking in the shadows and they want it that way. They don't want to draw attention to what it is that they're doing, because that compromises, what it is that they're trying to achieve. And, they're not like, other terrorist organizations like in other parts of the world who you want to take credit for all the bad deeds that they do. Like these are ghosts, they're specters, you know? So it's just, so I appreciate you bringing that up and sharing that story with us, because, you know, I think it's something that deserves far more awareness than what it's actually getting. So, and actually, there are a couple of organizations that I know of, and maybe if you know of any organizations as well, we'll link those up in the show notes for people to, you know, go and get more information on that for sure.
Yeah. Underground Railroad. I don't know if you've heard of them. That's a,
yep.
They're a big one, doing a lot of awesome stuff. I have a buddy who actually works for that organization. So, but yeah, you know, there's just, I think the beauty of travel is not in the Instagram photos that you see all over, like people traveling, oh, I'm at this beautiful lake, or oh, I'm here, or I'm here. I think the beauty of traveling is learning about other cultures. And it doesn't always have to be like going to less fortunate places, right? Or third world countries. I'm not saying that it always has to be about that, but there's just something about going and helping, especially kids. And that's really what the USANA Foundation focuses on is kids, right? But on the same trip to Thailand, we went out, we helped this village build a catfish farm, a frog farm, a mushroom farm, all like in the same area, right? And we all kind of tackled different projects. And I was working with a couple buddies on this frog farm, right? And it was something that was super hard work, but when we were done, just knowing that was going to sustain the village. You know, it wasn't something that we're just coming in and giving them $500 and saying, here you go, like we want to help out. Like we built something for them that was really hard, like labor intensive, right? Out in the sun all day. And it took us a lot of hours to do. But once we were done, like the gratitude, like that's something we don't get enough. Like talk about endorphins. And that's better than any drug or anything, right? To know that you just changed somebody's life moving forward, and the appreciation, you know, like a lot of these people, when we go out and help them, they're crying afterwards. Because for one, they don't understand why somebody would come and help them. Like they can't wrap their head around that. Like, why would you come all this way to help me? Right. So the appreciation is just amazing. Right. But then on the same trip to Thailand, we went because this pastor set up a after school program, because a lot of the kids, they just they have no adult supervision, right? Because their parents are working or whatever, and a lot of them were getting in trouble. And so he started this after school program and started a soccer club. So he would raise money so that he could rent this soccer field, right, in the middle of town. So we went and played soccer with the kids, and it was so awesome. Like they were just, for one, they thought it was amazing, because a lot of these places, they don't see white people, right?
Right.
They look at us and they're just like, what? This is so weird, you know? And depending on the place you go, sometimes they're not hairy, right? So like if you have hair on your arm, they're like, sometimes the kids will just pull the hair on your arm because they're like, what is this? Like they haven't seen stuff like that, right? But yeah, it's always just amazing seeing, like putting in a hard day's work and helping somebody, and then afterwards getting to celebrate with them, you know, and just the gratitude that they show you.
Right. And even if, you know, you don't get anything, let's say, of monetary value out of it, or nothing like tangible about it, I always describe it as leaving a carbon copy on your soul. You know, when you do something nice for someone else, and you can see that, your gesture, I mean, even if it's something simple, like one thing that I always try to do is like, anytime I'm checking out at like, let's say a grocery store or something, if my cashier like has a name tag, I will address like, that person by his or her name. And basically the reaction I usually get from that is always one that I love, because I can tell that no one else probably before me all day had gone through the effort to address them by their name. It's like I just address them as a person, not like a means to an end. It's like, you're only there to ring me up. It's like, you're a person with your own problems. You're working hard. You probably got similar issues to what I would face, and just the way that they feel like, just by me trying to be pleasant and polite, it felt really good, because I felt like I walked away from that. Again, like I didn't get anything from this person, like monetarily speaking or anything, but it just felt really, really good. And then I carry that with me through the rest of the day too. And maybe I'll do it to someone else, and who knows, they'll go and they'll probably help someone else that day too with that, and maybe kind of create a little bit of a chain reaction, if you will. Yep. So yeah, it's a good feeling.
Well, and look, you don't have to go to Africa. You don't have to go to Thailand for service, right? And that's the other thing. Like I got to give props to the CEO of USANA, company I work for, because he's so into giving back. Like that's just like we're a company, so and we're publicly traded, right? So you have to hit numbers, and that there's got to be some level of importance there, but like it's not the most important thing to him, and just to give you an example about service and really, like you talked about, even just saying somebody's name, how awesome that is, but then going out to the community and helping out the less fortunate also, even in your own community, can help you understand how good you have it, right? And one thing that USANA does is every week we can go out and volunteer during work hours. And so I guess it's not really considered volunteering for me. So I'm still getting paid by USANA to do it, right? But in a sense, that's because it's so important to the culture of USANA and the CEO that we give back. It's me getting to go out and help other people during work hours, because sometimes it's really hard. And I think that's why they did it. Like I've got 4 kids, right? I'm at work all day. Well, I'm working from home, right? But when I was going into the office, working all day, and then you come home and you want to spend that time with your family, because family is important. So you can volunteer with your family too, which is great, right?
Oh, cool.
But sometimes there's just a lot going on. So to be able to take a couple hours, and they don't even set a time limit. They're just like, go help people. And it's really cool working for a company that mindset is like that. And the opportunities that I've got to go travel and help other people, the bulk of it has been because of USANA. And, if anybody wants to, I don't really have, outside of working with USANA and the foundation, like it's not an agenda I'm trying to push, right? But if there are people that want to give back, look at these service trips, they can go to USANA Foundation, the website, and check it out. And the really cool thing about the USANA Foundation is that USANA actually pays the salary for all the employees that are on the foundation side. So 100% of the donations go back to, either serving communities or doing these trips like Thailand or Haiti. When we went down there and took a bunch of food after the hurricane, or Nepal, right? Like this is all funded through the donations of USANA, but USANA pays all the overhead, right? So
amazing.
Which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The foundation's grown quite a bit, and there's a lot of employees that work under the foundation. USANA actually bought a building that was right next door to us. That is now the headquarters of the foundation. That's not cheap, right? So like,
right.
So it's really cool to know. And look, there's a lot of great organizations out there that can't do that, and that doesn't mean they're bad, right? But they don't have a company like USANA that can pay all their overhead, right? So some organizations, even if 90% of their donations go to their cause, that's still super impressive. But most of them aren't even like that, right? So, but yeah, if people want to check it out, USANA Foundation's a great place to look into either giving back or helping out. So,
all right. Well, yeah, I'll get that linked up in the show notes as well for the listeners to go and find it there. So what's next for you, man? I know we're kind of, traveling is a little bit tricky right now, but I mean, do you see yourself getting out there for another service trip in the near future, or maybe some ideas as to where you think you might want to go to next?
So the service trips are a little different for me now. So my role at USANA is I'm over our athlete and sponsorship program. Mm-hmm. So when I went to Thailand, it was awesome because I actually got to take one of our sponsored athletes with me. And that's why I went, because, we really felt like I feel like it was important to show our athletes both sides of USANA, right? Like, I don't want them thinking it's just an exchange of services, right? Like, it's actually, there's more to USANA than that. So I know they've got a lot of service trips planned. I know a lot of them were canceled in 2020.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't know when they're getting back out, but I'm also fortunate because I get fun traveling in too, right? Like, I get to go to some of these events where our athletes are competing. Like, I went to X Games and watched my good buddy win it again for the second year in a row.
Nice.
Alex Pereira, and got to be right in the front, watching it. Like, there's nothing cooler than seeing one of your closest friends win something like that, right? Like, X Games is huge for these guys, huge. And my buddy's actually from Aspen, where they always held the X Games. So it's even a bigger deal, for him being local. Yeah. So I get both sides of the travel bug. Sometimes going for selfish reasons, sometimes selfless reasons. And both of them are awesome.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but I think my next trip will probably be to Germany, because we recently partnered with Bundesliga soccer football team, Wolfsburg, and so I'll probably go out there and watch a game and get to connect with the people over there. So,
right on.
Like I was saying earlier, like, I really think there's something like doing video stuff's great, but when you actually get to connect with people, that's where you really make, the lasting friendships and the closer you are with partners, and even people in general, the more you get done.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Germany, that's going to be a fun time. I went to Germany for Christmas and New Year's a couple years back, and that's a gorgeous country right there, and the history of the cities and everything. So you'll have a good time, no doubt. So getting to our wrap up now, because we've been talking for a bit. We kind of talked
your ear off
in the best ways, though. But we covered a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of topics here. And then, of course, one thing I've been starting to do with my guests is asking my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners, because information that they can hear in a podcast can only take them so far. Once they're done listening, action has to take place to move them forward. So what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to go out and start living a more adventurous life?
I would say trying to get on a service trip. Sometimes that's hard to do, but having the mindset that you don't have to go to another country or a third world country to help out. There's, that stat I told you earlier, 1 in 4 Utah kids go hungry over the weekend, right? Mm-hmm. Like they subsidize these schools, and the community will subsidize breakfast and lunch for these kids. But when they go home at night, most of them don't eat dinner, right? They're only eating when they're at the school. So what happens on the weekend, right? And that's why USANA put up this program to help with that, right? And help give to some of the schools that are in the Salt Lake area that need that, right? So we send kids home with a weekend worth of food. Now, it's not what some of us gluttonous people would think of as a handful of meals, but to somebody who doesn't have food, it goes a long way, right? So I would just say, go out and serve somebody, whether it's like you said, calling a cashier by their name, or a little thing like paying. I'll tell you another story, and this will kind of go into what I'm talking about. But I went to Starbucks a couple months ago with my daughter, and she really likes Starbucks, right? And she always gets like the hot chocolate, right? And so when I pulled up to the door, they're like, "Oh, the person in front of you already paid for it." And I was like, "What?" And it like blew my daughter's mind. And that, I think, was a real eye-opening experience for her. Like, people do that? Like, you can do that, And so then I paid for the car behind us, right? To hopefully maybe give them that experience, right? Because sometimes it's not even about the money, right? It's just, holy cow, somebody did that. I don't even know them. They don't even know me. And, I've known people who've seen somebody behind them with the groceries and said, "Here's $100, like have that go to the next person," right? Or even if it's $20 or whatever. And sometimes you don't understand how big of an effect that can be on somebody, right? Especially if you go to a lower income area and just go to a grocery store and buy like a candy bar and throw them $100 and say, "Give that to the person behind me." Like, and not even like, because when you do it that way, you're not looking for praise, right? You're doing it to be nice, and that's like, and it's an awesome feeling when you do stuff like that and you walk away. You don't need anybody to like praise you or say thanks or whatever. It's just you walk away and just know that you made someone's day. And sometimes you don't know how big that was. Like maybe these people really don't know how they were going to pay for their groceries, or they don't know how they were going to whatever, or go into a soup kitchen and helping out, right? So anyways, that would be my takeaway.
All right. Right on. And
long-winded takeaway.
Yeah. Well, as I've mentioned, I'll definitely put some links in the show notes to, kind of give people, a few leads to go off of should they want to seek out, either a service trip with the USANA Foundation. And I'll even put like Peace Corps' link in there, because why not? I mean, that was my jam, that was my service thing. And, I don't know if I want to put military websites, because I was in the Marine Corps too, but I'll leave that up to the listeners to decide if they want to go that route. But can
I ask you a question real quick?
Sure thing.
I don't want to turn into the interviewer, but like, how did you get into Peace Corps? Because a lot of people don't know how, or that's even a thing or whatever. So like, that's something really cool that you did. How did you come across that?
Well, I definitely got the travel bug really bad one time after my first international travel experience. I went to Japan, and I'm also a very late bloomer in the realms of international travel. I'm from Michigan, so I don't count my road trips to Canada as really an international experience. But I was 25 years old when I traveled to Japan on a study abroad for 2 weeks. And it made me very curious to see other parts of the world. And I was an elementary education major at college, and I was going into my last semester into my student teaching. And the job market for teachers in Michigan at the time were just, and it was in really bad shape. They were letting go of teachers left and right. They were closing schools, and so I knew that I needed to do something, because I didn't want to just go through all this schooling just to end up unemployed, right? And so I thought back on this travel bug that I just got, and also just the fact that I've come from, a background of serving others with 4 years in the Marine Corps right out of high school. And so I was kind of thinking, how can I blend like the two and two together? And one thing led to another, and it's certainly going to be, it's pretty much a story I could probably fill an entire podcast episode with, but I did end up choosing Peace Corps because they actually had an education sector to where, teachers can go and work in other parts of the world in remote places. And I'm like, well, I just so happen to now have skills in that. So let me actually apply these skills. Like if I can't serve the kids or any students here stateside, maybe I could help some elsewhere. So one thing led to another. I ended up getting selected to go to the Gambia. So that's kind of, basically a short, again, winded question to, your answer. But again, I could fill a whole podcast episode on just that alone. But
that's amazing, because some people don't know, and that's how you can kind of kill two birds with one stone, right? You get out, you get to see other cultures, and also help other people. So
yeah, and grow yourself too. I mean, which has pretty much kind of been a basis of what we've been talking about here, is just there's this quote that I like, and I'm not sure, I don't know where I get like half my quotes from sometimes, but it's he who returns from an adventure is not the same as he who had left. And I've noticed every time, and you could certainly attest to this as well with your service trips, is that you come back like a better version of yourself from those things. And usually it's because you were undergoing some hardship in some way. And as you know, you had to hike up this mountain for starters, and then seeing what was going on, and, kind of having to deal with the aftermath of that earthquake in Nepal, along with these villagers and everything, is just, it kind of it hardens you a little bit, Yeah. So it's, so I definitely love having those experiences.
Sleeping in places that you wouldn't normally, where they don't have showers, maybe the water's only on certain times, the power goes. I mean, that was my experience in Nepal. The power would just kick off, and it's hotter than hell there. And all of a sudden, you're trying to sleep after putting in a hard day, and you got to go back to this, I wouldn't really call it a motel, but things
put it
like
in quotations.
Yeah. Where at the time you're just like, I remember in Nepal where this happened, where there wasn't showers, there wasn't any power. So when I got to my room, I had to use my cell phone to even see where I was going. There was bugs everywhere. It smelled. I was basically sleeping on like wood pallets, right? I remember shooting this video of how like I couldn't sleep because there was dogs barking and whatever. And it went into, and I just did it because I wanted to remember the moment, but like my eyes were bloodshot, and I was just like, I can't sleep. There's blood on the sheets. There's bugs everywhere. Like it was just totally out of my comfort zone. And I've been to a lot of crazy places, right? But this was just like probably one of the worst places I ever stayed. And I was just exhausted from going to that village, right? So I did this little video, and I had shared the folder, like you can share a certain photos or like an album with an iPhone, right?
Right.
And it went into this this Nepal folder that I had shared with a buddy of mine and didn't even think about it. And then I got back to work and people were like laughing because he'd shared it with a bunch of other people at work. So I was just like, oh, all right. But it's funny because it's horrible when it's happening, like you said, but then once you're done and you're back to normal, you're like, wow, I really grew from that. Mm-hmm. Like now I appreciate an air-conditioned house. I appreciate having power. The things that we take for granted that you assume everybody else has the same luxuries as you, right? Or you look at the Kardashians and you're like, boy, I wish I had that. So it's
and there's so many people who wish they had what you have right now while you're wishing for more because you're comparing yourself to others.
Well, and that's what I tell people. It's like when I go to these places and it's just awful living conditions, the people there are okay with it because that's what they're used to, right? I'm used to a different standard of living. So I always compare it to the Kardashians. I'm like, it's kind of like if the Kardashians had to live my lifestyle. Like, I'm totally fine with it. Like my house, everything, right? Like, I'm just like, yeah, dude, this is great. But the Kardashians, if they had to drop down to my level, they'd be like, oh my God, this is poverty. What is this? Is crazy. So it's the same thing when you go to other countries, right? You're kind of like, you're dropping down your standard of living, which, again, you could take it two different ways. You can complain about it, or you can just look at it and be like, wow, what I got back home is pretty awesome.
Right.
maybe too awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on, man. All right. What I have for you next is I have what I call my final three. These are 3 questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show, and we're going to do these kind of rapid fire. And the first of those questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
I would say, man, like Tokyo is awesome just because the people are so polite. But I would have to say Ljubljana in Slovenia. I went out there for a ski jumping competition, which was mind blowing. They called it ski flying because these people were in the air for so long, right? But the city of Ljubljana, never seen anything like it. I don't think I would have ever gone there if it wasn't for this work thing that I was doing. And I'm just walking around the city thinking, man, this is super, super cool. And then Belgium's another one of those places, and Bruges. I don't know if you've been to Bruges or heard about Bruges, but I'd never heard of Bruges before when I went there, and I was just and I probably went there 12 years ago, and that's still at the top of my list.
All right, right on. Next question: what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Man, it's a good question. I don't know, man. Like I really feel like I've been pretty blessed. All right. Like I mean, there'd be cool things. Like I think it's going to be amazing going and watching a Bundesliga game, right? With a partner. But bucket list. I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing China and the Great Wall. I think would be
pretty amazing. Yeah.
So I'd say that's up there. It's up there on my list.
Okay. All right, cool. And I'm sure probably as we go on, more stuff will get added on there as we, learn about other things too, for sure. Okay. And the last question, and this is a 2-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
So ever since I was a kid, I remember getting asked this question, and I'd say a black panther. I think black panthers are awesome. And no, I've never seen one in the wild, unfortunately.
At least not yet. Not yet. All in due time, I'm sure.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, cool. Those That's it, man. That's all the questions I have for you. But I guess before we close out here, where can our listeners go to connect with you? And let's recap again where they can go to learn more about USANA Foundation. So, websites, social medias. What do you got for us, man?
Yeah, so I'm just at Danger Nacey on Instagram. I only use Facebook for work, so it's under Jason Nacey USANA. Just never been a big fan of Facebook, but I love Instagram, and then TikTok. TikTok's a dangerous app. You get realize how addicting it is. But if you want to see that ski flying, you can find me at Danger Nacey on TikTok as well, because I've got a clip of that, and it actually looks like a drone because it's in the air. That person's in the air for so long. But and then. Yeah, I mean, USANA Foundation, their website's just www.usanafoundation.com. And, again, I just throw that out because I think what USANA is doing is amazing. And the bulk of my travel is due to, them wanting to make people aware of what's going on in the world and documenting a lot of these awesome trips that they put on.
All right. And as I've mentioned, I will get all of those linked up in the show notes so the listeners can go and find them there. Well, hey, Jason, man, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Again, I mean, I was hoping we could have done this in person over in Squaw Valley, but as we've mentioned, interesting times we're living in right now. But either way, I appreciate you getting on the call with me today. And it's always fun to, just kind of take a trip down memory lane. If we can't travel right now, at least we could live vicariously through our past experiences and through the stories of others. So thanks a lot for being here and sharing all this with myself and the listeners, man. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Love the podcast, and hope to catch up in person soon.
All right. Likewise. Right on, brother.
All right. Take care.